Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host Kilu Nyasha, and engineering is Stephen Leader. And in every war, only one GI gets to be the first to refuse orders to that war. My first guest, Jeff Patterson, a U.S. Marine, was the first GI to refuse orders to his war, Gulf War I. He has since become a founding member and project director of Courage to Resist, a collective of activists who specialize in helping GI resistors who want to resist publicly. Jeff was one of the key leaders who helped launch the first Lieutenant Aaron Watada campaign, and my other guest followed through with that as well, and has since helped a long list of public GI resistors. And they also have a GI Rights Hotline, which helps all resistors, most of whom want to get out quietly. And there's a website, GIRightsHotline.org. That's GIRightsHotline.org. And the Courage to Resist website is listed, I believe, and on screen, and it's www.couragetoresist.org. Mike Wong is back, and he is a native San Franciscan who became a soldier during the Viet Nam War. He was very influenced by the anti-war movement, so when he received Vietnam orders, he went AWOL, absent without leave, then turns himself into the Presidio stockade with his lawyer, pled guilty to AWOL, and attempted to press a limited conscientious objector case. The Army turned him down and put him back on Vietnam orders. Mike escaped to Canada and lived in exile for 5 years. He returned after the war, pled guilty to Long Term AWOL, and received an undesirable discharge. However, he later earned a master's degree in social work and has been a social worker for 30 years and is currently active with Veterans for Peace and Asian Americans for Peace and Justice. Welcome, Jeff and Mike, to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. It's a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here.
All right. So let's start with you, Jeff, and talk a little bit about Courage to Resist.
Well, Courage to Resist is a unique organization in that we're the only group nationally that's taking responsibility for making sure that military war resistors to resisting Iraq and the Afghanistan war in more numbers now than ever have both political, moral, and logistical support, in that we actually fundraise nationally to pay their legal bills. So if they're facing the question of deployment or not, they don't have to worry about whether somebody's going to be there to support them. They don't have to worry about how do they pay their lawyers if they go to court-martial. And we've raised tens of thousands of dollars and paid many people's legal bills. And that's allowed
great.
people to step forward and try to voice their opposition from within the military, which you can imagine it's not easy to do.
I'm sure. Well, that's great. And what about the hotline?
Well, we work with a network of people around the country. And one of those very key allies that we have is the GI Rights Hotline. And you mentioned their website, GIRightsHotline.org. And they have a toll-free phone number that you can call from anywhere in the country, and phone numbers for people stationed in Europe and Japan, where people are waiting to give accurate information about different types of discharges. If I could remember off the top of my head, maybe Mike does. But, people should check out GIRightsHotline.org. Yeah.
All right.
I don't want to give the wrong number.
I will surely not. Thank you. And Mike, talk a little bit about Veterans for Peace and how you got involved.
Veterans for Peace is a national organization. The website is veteransforpeace.org. And we have chapters all around the country. We have a big convention every year. Actually, Cindy Sheehan got started with Camp Casey at our convention. She spoke at the convention that year, and actually Jeff was there. She inspired a bunch of vets and herself to go down to Camp Casey, which was a turning point in the peace movement. Veterans for Peace has been active in a lot of other campaigns. We've been doing a lot of demonstrations and marches clear across the country. A lot of local activism, because we have chapters everywhere, where local veterans organize teaching events, demonstrations, pickets, lobbying, pretty much the whole political spectrum.
Well, let me ask both of you this question. You're saying that there have been many demonstrations. However, we know that our mainstream media is not doing a very good job of reporting on the protests and demonstrations taking place across the country, because we hear very little. Is that what's going on, that we are just not being told, but there is a lot of anti-war activity?
There's a lot of anti-war activity, not only in Veterans for Peace, but in general. That gets very much underreported, as you say. We have these right-wingers who are going to these healthcare forums, and just a handful of them will shout and raise a stink and say things, and it's big news on the mainstream media. And yet you could have a couple of hundred peace demonstrators demonstrating somewhere, and it might be a small local story, but it usually doesn't make the national news.
Right.
So there's a very clear bias there.
In other words, there really is a lot of anti-war activity going on. It's just under the radar.
It's under the radar, yes.
All right.
Well, I would add that there is anti-war activity going on, but there's not nearly enough anti-war activity, and there are people doing things all around the country, and we work with people all around the country that hold vigils and protests outside of these military bases every time a conscientious objector or a war resistor faces a court-martial, again, for opposing the Iraq or Afghanistan war. And that's from Fort Lewis up in Washington State to Fort Hood in Texas to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and go on about these local communities in very conservative areas stepping up and really challenging the wrath of their neighbors to take a stand for peace. And they're doing that all around the country, and people in the military are continuing to organize within the military against these wars. But I think the civilians, we have been distracted to some degree by, for very good reasons, the healthcare debate and a number of other issues, while hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops continue to fight, die, and kill in these occupation wars around the country.
Exactly. And speaking of fighting, dying, and killing, what is this war costing us in terms of lives and money? But
you want to take some?